All right, welcome back to another Mayday Monday podcast. My name's Tony Carroll again. You guys have been here know the gist of what we're doing, how this all works. Before we get started with today's information and looking at the line of duty death, I want to first start off by mentioning those firefighters that we lost since the last time we were together. We had an Oregon volunteer was fatally injured at a barn fire. A North Carolina volunteer chief died from apparent heart attack. A Nashville firefighter from COVID, an Arizona firefighter from COVID, a Texas firefighter from COVID. A North Carolina battalion chief was found unresponsive after working his shift. An LA County captain died from apparent heart attack. A Mississippi volunteer chief from COVID. An FDNY firefighter was found unresponsive. And finally, just the other day, an Alabama firefighter suffered a heart attack while he was fighting a wildland fire. 23 firefighters so far in 2022. We want to, remember these firefighters and all the sacrifices that they have made. So far, 2022 has been pretty tough for the fire service. Hopefully, things will taper off. Looks like maybe COVID, we're getting past that. So perhaps the line of duty deaths for COVID will taper off, and we will be able to focus on those things that the other things that we have, heart attacks, of course, fires, and that kind of stuff. To review, let me real quickly review last month's Mayday. Let me share my screen. Here is last month. You guys may have remembered from that. It was Heart Health Month. In February is the heart health, and for everybody, not just firefighters, but again, with it being such a prevalent bad things for firefighters, we've taken the last few years in February to highlight this. It still is, one of the number one killers here. I guess it's almost 50% of our line of duty deaths are due to heart attacks. Again, these are some stats there that hopefully you can take home. We had 27 cardiac line of duty deaths in last year, and then keep this in mind that while we have 27 line of duty deaths, for every line of duty death from a cardiac event, there's 17 to 25 near misses, close calls. And that's a lot. 25 for every line of duty death, we've had 25 close calls. So is your heart in good shape? And if it's not, take that month. Hopefully you took last month. If you haven't, there's still time. I mean, it's a pretty important thing. So do that. Get a check. It looks like a lot of these firefighters with the line of duty deaths and those with the close calls, they had underlying conditions. This needs to be caught, needs to be checked, needs to be maintained. Need to get in and out and see these people, stay up on your heart health. So that is February's. This March again. You guys know March is the month that we typically honor or remember our Irish heritage. With that, we think about when luck and all those things that we have when it comes to Boston and it comes to Irish and what there's no more Irish town in America than Boston is. That's not why we are looking at Boston this month. I'm actually looking at it because Chief Schaefer reached out to me. I guess it was over a year ago when he called and said, hey, Tony, if you are looking for a subject to talk about, we could talk about the Beacon Street fire. When he did call, we actually I had already lined up to talk to Joe Arnold from Cincinnati. And we talked about Oscar Armstrong and that incident that they had. Again, another one that we can get so much out of. So we put it off. And again, as this happens, I like to feature the line of duty death that happened in that month. This Back Bay fire here, the Beacon Street, happened in March. of 2014. It seems like it doesn't seem like it's been that long. I'm sure for you, even Stephen. I know how how much this kind of captured the fire service, and it doesn't seem like it's been that long since it happened. So with us today, like I've been talking about, Steve Schaefer. Steve and I met some of the ISFSI stuff. He got involved in some of that, and I've seen him he comes on happy hours all the time and other events. And we've been able to, keep up and talk, and even some of the once a month, or actually every other Thursday, we
Yeah,
get
every other week.
together. Yeah, every other Thursday we get together with Phil Jose, retired out of Seattle. He holds this. There's a group of us that get together. I haven't been as active as I should be. We get together and we do this chief kind of talk about tactics and looking at buildings. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to kind of see the different ways about how it goes on. So I get to see Steve periodically there. Steve, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm glad we were able to make this work. But if you would just do us a favor here and fill us in on who Steve Schaefer is and how we got to get you here.
So my name is Steve Schaefer. I am a deputy chief for the Boston Fire Department. Currently, I'm acting as the chief of operations field services. I've been doing that since September. I guess I got here, through meeting Tony, and someone I forget who had reached out, but someone said that they were looking, I think it might have been Pete Van Dorp from the ISFSI, that you were looking for subjects for Mayday Monday. And I wrote him back saying I'd be willing to talk. And, it took over a year, but because we already booked up last year, but I'm glad it worked out, because I think that, nobody likes to really talk about their line of duty deaths, and a lot of people are reluctant. But I think that taking a really hard, objective look at these incidents is the only way to learn from them and improve the fire service and give meaning to their sacrifice. So I'm not happy to do it, but I think it's important.
Yeah, and I mean, while we get the reports, right? We got the city of Boston's report, that we can all link. And if you guys are looking for it, there's a link on the Mayday Monday. You find that there. We have the report. We even have the NIOSH report. And the NIOSH report, I mean, as much as it's great, and we do that, they seem to kind of be the same thing, right? And then the Boston report was good, but it kind of focuses on broader, over like a bigger changes that the fire department can make. So I think that this is a little bit more intimate, if you will, right? And especially if the guys know the people that were involved and can kind of tell us about the person, because again, that gets lost in a lot of these things is who the people are, right? And that I think that's we said we would never forget, but sometimes time goes on and it drifts out of our attention. And these are people, these are guys, the guys we worked with, you worked with, and we want to remember these things. So remember these people so we can remember that legacy they left, and don't let them die in vain. So thank you for coming on. Let's talk quickly. I like to start off here. We'll talk about where you're from, right? About the city. Boston's a pretty cool place. It's old, pretty old, right? It's the 24th largest city in the United States as of right now. It was incorporated as a town in 1690. A lot of American Revolution events happened in and around Boston. How big is the city?
The city is 48 square miles, and the population is it's about 680,000, give or take, of the last census.
Yeah, so I like to put that into perspective, and I used to work in DC, which is about the same kind of density, and now where I am, my density where I am now is one person. I'm sorry, 65 people for every square mile.
Yeah,
Boston is 13,000 people per square mile. So I mean, it's pretty dense.
yes.
Is it all like that? Is it all like the big cities? Do you have some neighborhoods and What do you have? Row homes? I know this was a row house, but is that most of the city?
No, actually, the back bay where the fire took place was a back bay. It was a tidal marsh off of the Charles River. Was filled in the 1880s, and a lot of the construction from then is from the mid 1880s to just after the turn of the century. Those are all, you guys would call them row houses, we call them brownstones, but they're ordinary construction, attached buildings, 3 to 5 stories. And it's one of the only areas of the city that's laid out as a grid because it was, sort of planned. Most of downtown Boston is laid out by cowpath. But
By what?
by cowpath, where the cows kind of. But no, I would say our bread and butter fire is what we would call a 3-decker, a 3-story wood frame. Most of the neighborhoods, they're detached, although in several they are, they could be contiguous, so more like a row house. But that's, when you look at Boston, that's our standard building is a 3-story wood frame. And we have plenty of neighborhoods with 2.5-story. We have neighborhoods with ordinary construction. There is a small compact downtown area with high rises and, an older Main Street type buildings, but.
If you look at that map, where on relation to this map here would be where the back bay area?
It would be up, bring your arrow up and then over to your left.
So more this way?
Yeah,
here?
it would be about in there, yeah.
And that there's still areas that are surrounded by water there?
Yeah, well, that, I don't know if you have any slides from it, but that particular building backed up to the river. There's some, it's not right on the river. There's a highway, sort of a road and some parkland, but there is nothing. And that's the widest part of the Charles River. It's over 1/3 of a mile wide at that point. So the wind was coming straight out of the north that day. So the river's to the north and it was blowing right into the back of that building, which was a large factor in this fire.
I got you. So let's talk about the fire department. How many, how big is the job? How many firefighters does
We have
Boston have?
a total of about 1,500 uniformed personnel. We have 2 divisions, 10 districts. That's the equivalent of a battalion in other places. And we have 58 companies, 33 engines, 22 ladders, 2 heavy rescues, and a couple of ancillary units.
And how many ambulances?
So none. We don't in Boston, which is not so common around the country. We have a 3rd service. There's police, there's fire, and there's Boston EMS. They're actually under the umbrella of the health and hospitals, and they run all the ambulances and do all the transport. So we have a kind of a 2-tiered medical system. You call 911, and for most of, or if it's a medical call, unless it's a shooting or a stabbing, which they don't want us on, which, that's their bag. They send the nearest fire company and either a BLS or an ALS ambulance. So we get there.
You say
and do,
except for shootings and stabbings?
Yeah, we are not included on shootings or stabbings.
Do you
really know
do
why?
you run like? Yeah. Do you run like typical like broken legs and things like that?
Yeah. Basically anything else we go, but where EMS has 22 to 30 rigs, depending on the time of day and the day of the week, running, and sometimes they're flat out, so they'll prioritize calls, and we just go, like most fire departments, first caller up, they send the unit. Somebody always goes.
Wow. And you said you call them districts, but that's like a battalion chief, and
That's the equivalent of a battalion, most
10?
places. Yeah.
10 of those?
Yeah.
This rig here, is that like some kind of brush truck or?
That is a dual purpose. It's both a brush truck and it's also for high water. We have in the past had limited flooding, but it was pretty severe a few years ago in the Seaport district. So if there's a storm coming, they'll reposition one of those vehicles closer in because it can go through not that familiar with it. It's a sock operation, but probably about 6 or 7 feet of standing water it can make it through.
Oh wow! What about shifts? What kind of shifts do you work?
We work 24-hour shifts, and it's a 42-hour week. We break it up a day on, two off, so 24/48, and then 24/96.
Oh, wow, that's nice.
Yeah, it works out.
Do you have to live in a city to work in the fire department?
Currently, the contract is you have to live in the city for the first 10 years after you're hired. And then after that, you're kind of a free agent.
Gotcha. What do you guys send on a fire call?
So we call it a box alarm. Struck box is 3 engines, 2 trucks, a heavy rescue. There's 2 of those in the city. You also get a 4th engine that's dedicated as RIT. You get the district chief, and that's on a struck box. If it's a confirmed fire, so smoke or fire showing, you get an additional a RIT chief and an additional truck for the RIT team. So a RIT group is an engine, a truck, and a chief.
Gotcha. Nice. And I mean, pretty busy place, right? I mean, you got some engines that are doing 5,000 runs.
Yeah, the busiest companies are doing 5,000 these days. There's probably 4 or 5 companies that'll do close to that. We do, as a department, about 75 to 80,000 runs a year.
Yeah, that keeps you busy, huh?
Yeah, it's I mean, depends. There's some companies that are slower, but in general, yeah.
Good deal. Well, how about the firefighters involved here? What they were at 33 and 15, is that right?
Yes, that's the station that is on Boylston Street. It's historic. It's a very old building. It was built in the 1880s. I think it might be on the National Register. I'm not positive about that, but it's one of those type of buildings. And it's on the way to Fenway, so those guys enjoy a lot of tourist traffic, sell a lot of T-shirts. But they're busy companies, and they're hard chargers. They're very proud. They got a lot of company pride.
So you say like walking distance to Fenway?
Yeah. It's Boylston
wow.
Street. It's then they walk down. It's probably less than a half a mile from the park. And Boylston Street itself is it's next to the Heinz Convention Center. It's near Newbury Street, which is a big shopping street. So it's a fairly busy tourist area. They get a lot of foot traffic.
Yeah, so I guess those brownstones that this fire was in, that was a pretty nice, pretty affluent area. Is that right?
It certainly was when it was first developed. Yeah, a lot of those brownstones were single-family homes for the wealthy Boston, the elite. Over the years, a lot of them turned into multifamily apartments. They were kind of cut up. Some of them were single-room occupancies, and a few still are. They're sort of halfway houses. Some of them are bed and breakfast. Some of them are still owned by one family, and it's multi-floor living. So you're never really sure, unless you're familiar with the particular building, because you might have gone in for a medical or whatnot. You're never really sure what the occupancy is going to be, other than they're almost all residential.
So do these? I guess I want to focus on these guys yet. So they get a pretty good fire duty there at 33 and 15.
They get their share. It's not as busy as it was back in the day. They cover the south end, which when the war was on, that was all burning. So, but they get some decent fire duty.
So Michael Kennedy, how long was he on the job?
I believe he was on the job from 2005, so that would have been 9 years.
9 years, and he was at truck 15 the whole time.
He was assigned to ladder 15. He not originally moved over. I think ladder 2 in East Boston was his original assignment. But I didn't know Mike very well. He had probably been at ladder 15 a couple of years, and not all of those, I think, on my group 2. But I had met him. He'd been detailed in a couple of times. He was kind of a very free-spirited, catch as catch can kind of guy. Unmarried, popular with the ladies. Kind of a goof.
Working in Boston.
But he was definitely a solid firefighter. Very popular with the guys. And I learned later that he was a big brother to a minority kid in Boston. And I seen some of the pictures, and they were clearly really well bonded to each other. I think he was really, really fond of this kid, really, really devoted to him, and vice versa. And I think that speaks volumes to his character.
Right. To be like you said, 33, popular with the ladies, but can still find time for a young kid to be a mentor and a big brother. That's a pretty good. It's pretty good.
And I know I've met some guys from FDNY who were up for something else, but they were there that day, the day of the fire, and they had left just before that day, and they went by 15 and 33, and they mentioned that they met Mike, and that how good a job he did at taking care of them. Gave them T-shirts, they could stay there, whatever they needed, and that they went out of their way to mention that to me when I met him. So he was a good guy.
And that seems to be the theme with these when I do this, right? That these guys that we lost are good guys. And so speaking of that, right? Lieutenant Walsh, Ed Walsh, 43 years old. He had come on the job in 2004.
Yes.
And was promoted in 2012. Did you know?
Yes.
You know Ed?
I knew Ed a little better. Ed worked at the YMCA in Brighton for years, and I used to be a member. And I knew he was on the job, but I didn't. That was before I was made chief, and so I'd see him at the desk, and we'd give each other the sort of little nod and wave. But he was promoted in 2012. He floated around the pool, and then he came through my station. He was assigned or temporarily assigned to Ladder 17, which is in the same house as Car 4 runs out of. And let me tell you, you couldn't want more in a lieutenant than Eddie Walsh gave you. He was about as solid as they come. He was completely squared away. He was thoughtful. He was smart. He was into the job. He's smiling there, which was not rare, but Eddie, he had that military crew cut. I believe he was a Marine. I'm not really sure, but he certainly looked like one. And he was about 6'2". He was a big guy. He looked intimidating, but as soon as you talked to him and that smile came out, it was kind of like a gentle giant.
Yeah, that's what I saw in some of the research. Was his nickname was that Gentle Giant?
Yeah, he was just a super guy, and he wanted to get back to Ladder 15. He was an officer there, that house, and I talked to him and said that I'd be happy if he took 17 and stayed, but he wanted to get back there, and I felt fortunate that even though he went back to 33. It was still in my work group, so I still had him in my command as an officer, and felt really confident in his abilities. And you like to have good guys under you, so he was definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it looks like he was from a firefighting family. It's his dad. His dad was on the job.
Yeah, and not in Boston, and I think he came from Watertown, which is a suburb just outside of Boston. But a lot of his relatives were on the job, and yeah, he was very solid.
Yeah, tough loss. So let's focus over here on Beacon Street. What about the day? Was it a typical day in Boston? No, nothing out of the ordinary, other than I know you said it was windy.
It's for those of you who know New England, there really is no spring. Winter has to be dragged away kicking and screaming, and that March was no exception. It was a very cold day. It was about 34 degrees, so just above freezing, and windy. I remember that morning we had a chiefs meeting. That's where all the on-duty district and deputy chiefs go to headquarters, and we get a little, pep talk from the commissioner, which always devolves into, you're not doing your jobs, some way, shape, or form. And then they have people, some other topic. I can't remember for the life of me what was talked about that day, but I do remember on a break, our headquarters was built in 1950 or so, and not a whole lot's been done since then. So the windows rattle when it's windy, and it was really windy that day, and kind of raw. And I remember I looked out the window and I said to no one in particular, as I used to do a lot on days like that, bad day for a fire, or bad night for a fire, a snowy, cold night, driving rain, really brutally hot summer day, bad day for a fire. Just sort of absentmindedly. Unfortunately, that day I was right. And as you'll see, as I get into the fire, it would have been good of me to have remembered saying that, which I didn't really in the event. When I got up there, did my size up.
I get it. We had the same kind of thing, right? We would typically get some back porch fires. We have ordinary constructed row houses, typically 2, maybe 3 stories. And it was on windy days, we would, get a row of those back porches that were wood frame attached to the back.
Yep.
And that was a typical, again, like you say, like on windy days, you would say that would be a typical thing to get. So a windy day, but otherwise,
Otherwise, an unremarkable day. Got back from the meeting. We went out and had lunch. As my habit was back then, after lunch around 1:30, I'd tell my aide, all the chiefs have drivers, have aides. I said, hold all my calls. I'm going to go study the back of my eyelids. And I laid down for an hour or more. So that's what I did on that day. And at about 2:40 in the afternoon, the bells go off, the tones, and they're striking 1579 Beacon and Essex for 298 Beacon Street. That neighborhood, like I described, it's, you can see the construction in the buildings. They're mostly residential. It's not a typical time of day you'd expect a fire. It's kind of in the middle of the afternoon. People are mostly at work. My initial thought was, a lot of times it's food on the stove. Something that gets out. Some of those places you'll have, especially in the basements, but anyway, you might have a dryer vent, cold day, somebody walking by or driving by mistakes the exhaust from the dryer for smoke or steam for smoke. But I wasn't really expecting it to be anything significant when I slid the pole. So I go from a heated room inside down to the apparatus floor that none of the doors are open. I get my gear on, we get in the buggy and we get out first. But now I'm in the car, I don't feel any wind. As we're going up en route, we're going up Berkeley Street towards Beacon. And the trip is not quite a mile, but maybe close. 3/4, whatever. I hear engine 33 call off. 33 is on Beacon Street, 4-story brick, smoke showing, 33 will be command. All right, now I got to get my game face on. I know Eddie wouldn't have called smoke showing if we didn't have something. He's not going to mistake that for anything else. So now I'm thinking about, I'm still not exactly sure which side of the block it's on. I'm not familiar with that, that particular building, but I'm starting to think about, my size up considerations and whatever else. We pull around, go up Beacon Street. I get there and I see 33 parked short of the building, short of the entrance. There's a line, 1.75 inches stretched up the front stairs. So it's a brownstone, like a typical New York brownstone. You have a stoop that goes up basically a story, half a story, to a front entrance, and then steps that go a half a story down. There's a door under the stairwell that leads to another door that leads you into the basement in the front. So in the front, the basement is about a half a story down. The building's on a slight grade. In the back, it's a walkout. So it's basically a full story in the back. Now, it's been 8 years, and I know sometimes it seems like yesterday, but and so my memory and of the vision of what happened is very clear, but the times, exactly what the sequence of things happened is a little less clear. And from the time I pulled on scene, which was about a minute after 33 got there, it's 50 something seconds. I called off command when I got out of the car to the time the excrement hit the fan was 2 minutes and 50 seconds, right? 2 minutes and 50 seconds. Time on the fire ground is, time is time, a second's a second, but your experience of that is fungible. If you're inside a nasty hallway calling for water, the 15 or 20 seconds it might take to get water at the nozzle can seem like an eternity, right? That's forever. Standing in front of your building, and Tony, I'm sure you've been a command officer, even when things are going right, less than 3 minutes can go by like that, in the blink of an eye. So there's a report that it's in the basement. I'm looking up to do my size up. want to count the stories, want to get it, make sure I get a good look at it. And I see lazy smoke coming out. The picture you had is sort of after things got going. That's after things got bad. But if you imagine that same picture with just some lazy smoke coming out of the top of that doorway, that's what I saw on arrival. It didn't look like much. But as I look up, and I'm counting stories, on the left-hand side, there's a fire escape, and it's on each floor. It's a, I think if you go back, yeah, there you go. There's little balconies, and there's a ship's ladder, straight ladder with a little bird cage around it. So on that top left window, I see one tooth. No, it's down and to the right. So if you move your arrow down and to the right, not too that far, a little, yeah, that window. I see a series of 3 people come out that window. They don't stop and wave and say, we need help. They don't say anything. They get right on that ladder and scurry down. They were adults, I don't know what age, not old, but they're coming out of that window like their life depends on it. That didn't square away with what I saw coming out of that doorway. That was my first kind of, but I got a report that we had a fire in the basement. And engine 33 was the first one there, and they were the only one there for a minute because ladder 15, which usually runs out of the same house and would have got there concurrently, was, I think they were getting their computer fixed at the shop. They were not available immediately for that response. So the hydrant man, we run 4-man engines, and there's an officer, a driver, a pipe man, and a hydrant man. So typically the officer and the pipe man get out and start advancing the line. We forward lay in, the hydrant man grabs the hydrant, charges that when he's told, comes up and then follows the line in. The hydrant man that day was detailed over from the truck. Before he follows the line in, he decides to do some truck stuff. He goes down the steps to the basement door under the stoop and investigates, right? So he goes into that's the basement level. He comes in the front, go down the steps through that door. He comes back up to me. Now, I didn't see him go down there, but he comes back up to me and he said, "Chief, it's down there. It's right there." And he points to the front of the basement. So, and then I think he started to go, into the building to follow the line. I didn't stop and ask him what he meant by that. I wish I had, but it might not have mattered. But I assumed that meant he found the seat of the fire in that front basement apartment. And my thought process was, that makes sense. It's right below the door. It's coming up. And if we get water on that, it's going to make everything better, right? In the meantime, again, this is getting the sequence. Engine 7 had pulled up. They're the second due engine. They're out of my house. John McManus, a very senior officer, gets out of the cab, and I look over and I say, "John, grab a big line, go up the front stairs, back up 33, and hold the interior stairs," right? Tactics 101, multifamily, control the stairs. I think that was before I got the report that it was right there. So now I said, okay, that's 2 lines. My third line is engine 22. Typically in Boston, the third engine goes to the rear of the building. But I figured the best bet was to get a line in that door and get water on where I thought the fire was now. So on the radio, I said, "I need engine 22 to report to the front of the building with a big line." They radio that they got the message. They start coming over. They're kind of getting set up. And then this picture now happens. It goes from, in what seemed like 2 or 3 seconds, from kind of lazy smoke to thick, angry, black, boiling smoke pouring out of that doorway. I see a bunch of firefighters, I didn't count them, tumble out of the door like little rag dolls and tumble down the steps. So I just, in my head, I assumed that was engine 33. Trying to get the timing right. I had given a report that I got a basement fire and that I've got people self-evacuating. I see that. And you talk about recognition prime decision-making. I didn't have that particular slide in my deck. The first thing that went through my head is the diesel pits we did as recruits. They have a big concrete tank, they fill it with diesel fuel, they light it off, and it's, it's that same kind of smoke. And then, you're supposed to advance with overlapping fog nozzles to get to whatever the shutoff valve or potential shutoff valve would be there. So that's the first thing that went through my head was, that's what it looks like. Maybe an oil tank in the basement might go. I just didn't, it didn't make much sense. And again, you have to remember, I didn't, in the front of that building, you couldn't feel any wind because it was coming straight off the water from behind the building. And so the wind wasn't, I didn't have a lot of time to really think about it, but it's not like a wind was blowing in my face. So I didn't have that in my head that might be impacting things. I struck a second alarm. Well, first, I believe, I've got the timeline here. Yeah, I struck a second alarm at the same time. Engine 33 said, charge our line. And the next thing I did, I saw that smoke and I saw him tumbling down, and I said, fire alarm emergency traffic, which is not actually in our, communications SOP, but it's just the first thing that came into my head. I said, I want all members off the first floor, everyone off the first floor. I stepped on 33's Mayday, first Mayday message when I was saying that. And then the Mayday was called, and I evacuated. I said, I want everybody to evacuate the building. I didn't know what had happened. I still hadn't wrapped my head around that, but I knew it was bad. And my thought was, we got to get everybody out of there and regroup, figure out what's going on, and come up with a different plan or an attack plan. And everybody did get out, but not Mike and Eddie. They were trapped in the basement. But the officer of ladder 24 who had gone in to do a search on the first floor came up to me and showed me, he just showed me his hand. He didn't even say anything. His glove was off and his right hand was burnt. There was skin hanging off of it. I found out later that, and much later, and not through him, from a friend he had talked to, that he was searching it when that engine 7 was up there they were on the landing going down to the first floor, to the basement from the first floor. They had a big line. They stopped there. They were going to get the line charged and then go down because they knew something was down there. And they said, Johnny Mac said, it felt and sounded like a freight train came up those stairs. So they didn't even think about it. They dropped the line and ran for their lives. The line, their line was burned through. 24 is up there searching the same thing, but this officer from 24 said that when the heat hit him, his first instinct was to take off his facepiece. I mean, you don't, it's just one of those like fight or flight survival things. And I guess he took his glove off to do that. And he put it up on his facepiece and then backed out. And I guess that, he couldn't get it off, but that saved him. If he had taken his facepiece off, he probably would have died right there.
So 33 has got the line in, and they had made it down to these
They
steps?
went down because they, unbeknownst to me or anybody else until afterwards, the occupant, the woman who lived in that back basement apartment, who had called 911, went out to the front, met 33, and she said, it's down in my apartment. You got to go in the first floor and down the stairs, which they did. Conditions were not bad. They knew they had something. They felt heat and they saw some smoke, but they couldn't find the seat of the fire. We think that they went into her apartment, which is off the hallway to their left as they came down the stairs, because the fire had gotten into the ceiling space, and in the hallway, they had a drop ceiling. So the radiant heat was not as bad in the hallway, where in the apartment, there was only one ceiling. So there was more heat in the apartment. And I think they assumed that more heat, the fire must be in there. So they went into that apartment.
Is that where they were? So while they were down there, while they were in that apartment, is that when the event, when the window broke or whatever?
That's when the event. So they were in the apartment. 7 was at the top of the stairs, getting ready to charge their line and go down that same stairwell. When the best they put together is that the fire started in a rear shed, and we can get into the origin.
Yeah.
But there was a vestibule. If you move back to your right, the cursor, and that vestibule connected to the hallway had a door, but it had a glass, probably a 2x2 or more section of glass in that doorway, which was not fire rated. And they believe what happened was that glass failed. Right? So it's not this door, that's the side door. That door was open because the building manager, someone called the building manager, or he got the notification from Central Station. He opened that door, encountered smoke in the shed, and backed out and left that door open. So that door was open. The interior door, the next interior door,
Gotcha. Yeah.
one that they think the glass failed, and that the wind then came straight through there. Now the front door was open, so the flow path was completed, right? You had the back door open, the glass failed, up the stairs and out the front door with a wind of steady, probably 30 miles an hour, gusting to almost 60. A blowtorch off that hallway. Now, Mike and Eddie were not caught in that hallway, but they were trapped now in the back apartment. They called for their line to be charged, and it was, but their line had burned through on the stairs already.
So the contractors, what they were doing, welding on this gate or back here?
No, on to the left. But you can see the
Okay.
fire escape in the picture on the left. So the building, that would be from the front, that would be the delta exposure.
Yeah, yeah.
There was unpermitted welding going on. And they have video of the guys, some slag got down into the base of that shed. And it burned, and instead of burning up the side, it went in and up.
And okay, and that was this. So the fire was originally when they in this
On
shed
the
here.
other side of that shed, yes, and it got into the
Okay.
structure, and I'm not sure, the construction, but the shed communicated the sort of the space of the shed up top of the ceiling must have communicated with the building. Instead of a brick wall there, it was probably open, or there were poke throughs, so it got into the building. And it might have been going for a little while, the timing, because the welders tried to throw some snow on it. There was snow left over from, the week ago. And then they packed up and they left.
Oh, they were gone.
They were gone.
Wow.
I don't know if they had, immigration status issues or what, but they left, and the fire might have had minutes to get going in the void spaces before anyone knew what was going on.
So seven engine is second due, and you told them to pull. They had the 2.5 inch line.
And a 2.5 inch line. I told them to back up 33 and control the interior stairs. They got to the top of the basement stairs. It's a little dog leg, it takes a jog 90 degrees. They stopped there. They masked up. They were going to charge the line and go down the stairs when the glass failed, or, if that's what happened, and it came roaring up the stairs at them and chased them right out of the building.
And even burned up their hose.
It burned their hose. Yeah.
Wow. So, all right. So we got Ed and Mike are in the basement, and you think they retreated to this apartment on the left?
There was an apartment on the left. There were safety bars on the windows in the back, so they couldn't get out that way. And the two apartments in the basement didn't communicate with each other. So the only way out of that basement apartment, unless you broke the windows and tore the bars off, was through that hallway.
Back up to this step.
Or either back up, they could have gone the rear door, but they had to go back into the hallway first, and the hallway was a blowtorch.
Yeah.
Okay. They called a Mayday. We're fortunate in Boston, we send a RIT chief, so there was already an accountability chief and a RIT chief there by that time, and the safety chief had just arrived when the Mayday called. So I didn't have to have the responsibility of still trying to command the fire and the RIT operation. Engine 37 was the RIT company. The officer who was an acting officer said, "Chief, 37's ready. We can try and go in the front." And I just said, "Not without a line." I didn't want anybody going in that building without water. So 37, Rescue 1, and Engine 22, which had the big line, which I had requested, they got that. They made 3 attempts to get through that door in the front under the stairs. The furthest they got was 5 feet, and all of them got third-degree burns. With a charge.
Basement door. The basement door. Wow.
Basement door with a charged and flowing 2.5 inch line. Eddie and Mike continued to call, charge the line, and the line was charged, but they were getting no water because it had burned through and it was just flowing openly on the stairs. You know, I got reports from ladder 26, which was the first truck in the rear, that there was an occupant trapped on the balcony on the third floor, I believe it was. They picked her off on the stick. Then they reported that there was heavy fire in the rear.
I have some audio. Can I play some audio for?
Absolutely.
All right. Let me stop this. Oops, stop the share. Find the audio. This was on YouTube that I found. This is right about right before, I believe this is when you had called emergency evacuation. This is and one of the things I think you probably guys have, the dispatcher was amazing. So here's a little bit.
Tony, I can't hear it very well. I don't know if everybody else can out there and
Okay.
but so I had ordered the third alarm company, second alarm.
Yeah. I know one thing you had said before was the amazing job that the lieutenant did getting the message, calling the Mayday. You can tell, obviously, he must have found a spot down there that he thought he could seek some refuge in, and was still able to. All right, once we get water, we'll be okay, huh?
In the apartment, but I don't think there was active fire there yet. And he did radio that he was in the front of the basement, and certainly not any fault of his own. It's a very stressful situation, but he was in the front of the rear apartment. And so that was one of the reasons why we kept concentrating efforts on going through the basement front door, because we assumed, or we had heard that message that he was in the front of the basement. But, you know,
So the conditions, the picture on the left, these guys, was there, this was a ladder truck that was back there, right?
initially it was ladder 26, and then I think engine 10, so most of the first alarm assignment was not in the rear of the building. Ladder 26 got back there first. And then the back of the building there, that it says private road, it's called Back Street, has no hydrants. So there was an issue getting a good water supply back there for a little while. Companies, and then they had the heavy.
Uh-oh, hope we didn't lose Steve.
A lot of them, but one of them had 22 gone right to the back with tank water. Would that have been enough to at least knock enough down to get Mike and Eddie out of there? No, I'll never know. 500 gallons, if in the right spot, goes a long way, but there was already a ton of fire in there. But given the information that I had and my situation awareness at the time, I still think that I did a correct thing. Water on the fire. It's just, hindsight's 2020.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So this, again, I mean, how long into the fire did you lose contact with 33?
Eddie's last message, where he called for a big line now, was 14:57, and they got there at 14:45. So it was
12 minutes.
12 minutes after they called off, and that was his last transmission. And I was not relieved, but Joe Finn, who was then the deputy, who's my boss, showed up. He's a second alarm. He showed up about 2 minutes after that. We had a brief conference. He took command. I went around to the rear. But I'm not sure when Eddie and Mike ran out of air, but I always consider it that they died on my watch. I've never felt responsible in the fact that I think that the orders I gave, and more importantly, the orders that I might not have given, contributed materially. But I do feel accountable in that they were under my command, and I have to answer for what happened, what did happen. And that's spurred me since then to try and figure that out. And that's why I talk about it and try and figure out, to what the lessons were that we can actually apply to our tactics and our situational awareness to hopefully avoid the same situation. In this case, maybe it was unavoidable. I don't know. And I think that, the goal of no firefighter line of duty deaths, while it's an admirable one and something to shoot for, I don't think it's realistic. This is a very dangerous job, but I think that the better we understand it and study these things and see what can and does happen, the better decisions we'll make on the fire ground and hopefully avoid the bulk of these.
Yeah, I think that there's a fine line, right? And we've lost so much experience, right? The fire duty is not like it used to be. And I'm sure when you came on, when I came on, we had those guys who fought the fires in different technology and times that were able to relay that to us. Now that the fire duty's down, we have to rely a lot on that research.
Yeah.
To really get that. And I think that's where, there's that fine line again where, I don't want to, research is new. I don't want to do it. We're going to stick with the old guys. Well, the old guys they're not here and they're not passing on, or the information isn't as relevant as it used to be. So I really think that, we have to lean on this research. We have to lean on you too, that went through this, and we lean on Boston, and it looks like, what you guys, your recovery from this, again, you're not letting these guys die in vain.
We hope not.
So this went to 9 alarms, right? Did it get to the exposures, or did it just burn
No,
the build the?
just the building. Those buildings were, they were built a long time ago and pretty solid, the firewalls. There was smoke migration into both the Bravo and Delta exposures, but no fire ever got in there on any of the levels. But the fire just in the original building just kind of continued to burn floor by floor and then right through the roof. It 40 companies, when they finally got good water and they got the bars removed, they pushed into the basement, knocked down the fire at that level, found firefighter Kennedy. He had taken refuge in the, I guess, in the bathroom, I think, in the front of the back apartment. They found him there. Lieutenant Walsh he was found much later because they had they had some sort of hostile fire event on the first floor and it caused the ceiling to drop. There were still guys trying to get in on the first floor in the front. And the overpressure pushed them out and several more guys got burned and injured. And Deputy Finn said, "That's it, no mas, no one else is going in the building." An hour or more later, I don't have to look at the timeline. They said, okay, the fire was up on the third floor and the fourth. And companies went back in and found Eddie at the bottom of the stairs. And what we think he was going back to find out why the line had no water. That's our assumption, but he was right at the bottom of the basement stairs.
Yeah, I hope the people watching this will go and investigate. Find the audio on YouTube. Find I attached the links to the NIOSH report, to the Boston's report that put out after this incident. Boston's report, of course, is digs deep into their fire department, their operations, and how they could move on and hopefully prevent this from happening again. What after the fire? What obviously I'm sure that Boston was shooken up, was in a bad position. What kind of recovery effort, from training, from operations, and that kind of thing, did you guys do to hopefully prevent this from happening again?
Well, so that fire was in March of 2014. That June, Deputy Finn was elevated to commissioner of the department, and one of the things he did was institute a very robust training program, which had been lacking up to that point for a variety of reasons. Live fire training, and they wanted to sort of study wind impacted fires in particular, which led to a grant. And several years later, by the time it came to fruition, was a new burn building specifically constructed to enable wind-driven effects and flow path, uncoordinated ventilation, to show the effect of that. We put together, when I was in training, I made deputy in 2018 and was in training. Based on some of the UL stuff we had seen, we put together a fire dynamics training program and are continuing that to this day. So our operations, I think, have improved in the field. And we're starting officer development to get these at all ranks. So we're trying to give it to the recruits and to the officers at each rank, more tactical, strategic, and some of the newer science coming out, to improve operations at all levels. And so far it seems to be paying off.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I know before we got on, we talked about your involvement with UL and going around doing some of that the boot camp, the fire dynamics boot camp. Good stuff. I know with ISFSI, we're doing some of that stuff with our basement fire class.
Yes.
Your guys are involved, and so they've really brought some good stuff to our training. The UL boot camp. You said you were going to you went to Oregon, I guess, to do theirs, and you went to Philly.
Yep, Philly, Oregon, and then just recently Connecticut hosted one for the New England region.
And they get really good reviews, right? I mean, guys are really getting their hands on and seeing this stuff up and close and personal.
Yeah, up and personal, and it's geared towards training officers. So with the hope that they can now take that information and use UL's gives them all the the PowerPoints and the presentations and the experiments, and they take what they can and want out of that, and then bring it back to their departments and hopefully trying to spread that knowledge and that those experiments and the tactical considerations from them to spread that around.
So speaking of spreading that around, with the podcast here, and we get some good people on from the departments that lost people. What do you think are two or three things that you want people to take away from this? What they could learn and hopefully apply in their job.
Well, I'd say one is, and this is for anyone who's in command of an incident, that you really, you don't ever get complacent, and try and take in as much as you can, even if it's requires a pause when you're sizing up, because you kind of never know. I mean, you have to have it in the back of your head that things can go south, and if they do, it usually happens very quickly. And I think maybe a little pre-gaming, they talk about visualization for athletes. I mean, anybody who might be in or is in a command position has to think about, what's the worst case and what do I do when that happens? Am I prepared for a Mayday? Am I prepared when something goes, horribly wrong? And part of that preparation, I think, is, there's Project Mayday is a really good one. Don Abbott's, and I recently caught on to the 16 things that are said most frequently over the radio prior to a Mayday. And when you hear a couple or more of those, you get ready for it. And I think stuff like that is very important for anyone who's might be in command to pay attention to pick up on the cues, because you may not have, like you said, you may not have that breadth of experience to know this doesn't sound right. This isn't, this is not going to go well. And dovetail to that is trust your instinct. If you think something's wrong, it probably is, even if you don't know why.
So a couple of things you said there. One about Don Abbott. We had Don on Mayday Monday podcast a few months ago, where we talked about his work there with Project Mayday and the valuable information that he's getting, and hopefully, while it's numbers, there's definitely stuff there that we could take. I think we could really learn, especially like I like the information he had about most of the Maydays are cleared by the person who has a Mayday. He clears a lot of them, and then people close by.
Yes.
So that kind of reinforces that need to have reinforcements. Another thing you said about the pause, take a pause. We have O2X's in town doing their stuff, and we had some mental performance stuff, and the girl said something about a tactical pause, which I'll go back to Andy Fredericks, and one of his lines was always take the time to make the time, right? That little bit of time that you take, and I think he was talking more about like hose line and advancement, right? If you take the time to lay it out right, it's going to pay dividends. But same thing for command officers. If you take the time to size it up, take in the information, right, it's going to help pay dividends at the end with being more efficient, not needing as many resources and so on, and we can get the job done more efficient. But those are good things. Again, I can't say enough about you coming on talking about this. I mean, you were the incident commander, so I know that there is a lot of weight on your shoulders for those people that are responding, and the burden that you take to carry them and see them through safely. And these fires are difficult, and there's a lot going on there that made it difficult for them. It wasn't their what they thought they were going to face, and things changed. And thank you again for coming on. I think that Boston's got a good guy there. If you get that position permanently, they're going to get some good. It's going to pay dividends for them, right? You being in that position. So I hope it works out.
We'll see.
So real quick, thank you, Chief, again. I want to move on to this month's skill drill. While I don't have a skill drill written down, a couple of things I want us to focus on that we're going to work on is evacuation, the emergency evacuation of a fire. You heard in the Mayday audio there. He felt conditions were so bad on the first floor to get out. Well, can you do that? Can you do that safely? Can you do it efficiently? These are very difficult situations that we're going to need to get out of. So with that, from this month's posting, we have some from the IAFC rules of engagement. Firefighters should be able to do this. A withdrawal from a life-threatening position must occur early enough to allow a safe exit from the building or to relocate to a safe location. Firefighters should understand that an emergency exit from a building often takes longer than it took to get into the interior operating position, and conditions will be worse. No hesitation should occur, as seconds can mean surviving or dying. Are you ready for this? Is your team ready to evacuate? Again, it's not as easy as just picking up your stuff and going out. Going to find your keys on the table and walking back out. It's going to be a difficult evacuation. From the IAFF Fireground Survival Program, again, some of us have been through that stuff, and hopefully you are. When backing out, consideration must be given to the firefighter at the tip. If all members on the line begin pulling, the firefighter at the tip risks losing control of the nozzle. In a situation where he needs that thing to flow water, it can be bad, right? The tip firefighter may want to keep the nozzle in his or her possession while backing out, especially if it's needed for protection. In other cases, a firefighter may leave the nozzle, turn 180 degrees, and follow the hose line outside. In either case, the movement must be dictated by those positioned at the tip. So you can see by those statements there that this is not some easy task to just get out. You need to prepare. I get it. No one wants to go practice how to emergency evacuate a building. Just like no one wants to go practice how to squirt water from the outside. Both of those are skills that we need to do because they're going to be called upon to do them. When you're in a situation where the need is to evacuate, it can't just be a lazy, complacent walk out the door. It needs to be an orderly, efficient emergency evacuation of the position that you're in. So make sure you practice this. Set up a scenario where you're at the burn building, or maybe you just do it in the day room. But that way you can kind of practice getting out. If you trip and fall and fall over something and it delays your exit, it could be deadly. So these are some things that we have to practice. So again, this month's skill drill is to set up a scenario, set up a practice where you're deep into a building, the IC calls for an emergency evacuation, and you and your crew need to get out. So again, thank you, Chief Schaefer, for being willing to talk about this. You did the guys well. Again, we don't want these members to die in vain. The chief is going to come on and talk about that. And it's great that we learned a little bit about the members involved. So with that, that concludes this month's Mayday Monday. It's March. Get out there, enjoy yourself on St. Patty's Day, but don't get too crazy. If it's time to evacuate the bar, make sure you're able to do that.
What do we fast?
Thank you all. Yeah. Happy. Have a good St. Patty's Day. This will get released soon. Thank you again to Fire Engineering for doing this. We appreciate all that they do. So thank you, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you, Tony.